Welcome everyone to the Clinical Neuroanatomy seminars today. Today we have a wonderful movie lined up called My Love Affair with the Brain, the Life and Science of Dr. Marian Diamond. And this is in collaboration with Luna Productions, and you will have the chance to have a chat with the directors and creators after the movie, which is quite exciting. And I think we already saw Gary amongst the mix of people in the waiting room. So for those of you who don't know us yet, the Clinical Neuroanatomy seminars started about 10 years ago in London with a small following at the time of about 11 people. And obviously back in the good old days, it was in person. Now we have moved the whole events online, and we expanded dramatically by including events like today, the CNS movie, for example. The whole idea is that this is to engage with researchers, bridge the gap between research and the general public, and also include artists who work with topics of the brain. All the movies or all the videos of the talks that you can see in the background here are available on our YouTube channel. And a lot of people are also following us currently on the YouTube live channel. Just for information, today's session is live on YouTube, but the recording will be deleted afterwards, so the movie isn't up there for public consumption as such. Now, today's event, as I said, is brought to you in a collaboration between Luna Productions and the CNS seminar team. Luna Production and the creators of this beautiful movie, Catherine Ryan and Gary Weimberg, will be with us later on to answer your questions about the work and life of Marian Diamond and about the story of the movie. And then you can see the team in the background. That's myself, Henrietta House, Ahmed Bey, and Michelle Thibault de Schotten. Now, before we start, two things. Housekeeping. So we expect you to respect the rules, be constructive when you ask your questions. Ideally, you type your question in the chat box or send it directly to Henrietta House, who will then lead the Q&A later on. We also kindly ask you to mute your mic, but you're more than welcome to keep your video on if you like to. For those of you who don't know yet, as I said, we are on YouTube, we are on Twitter, we are also on Facebook, and we try to keep everything as up to date as we can possibly can. And the next event will be a CNS talk on the 24th of September, where Parashkev Nachev will present his work, probably on strokes, to be confirmed. Now, here we go. Today we have this wonderful movie, and I'm very much looking forward to it. It's one of my favorite science documentaries, and also Marian Diamond is one of my heroes. Enjoy.
It is the most magnificent structure on this earth. A full human brain that you can hold in one hand. Nothing can compare with it. Those cells can produce ideas. Have you ever thought how a cell could produce an idea? This is who you really are. Take away the brain, you take away the person. I've spent more than 60 years studying the brain. and it was pure joy. Don't you just love the brain?
Marian Diamond's lectures on YouTube have over 1.7 million views, making her the second most popular college professor in the world.
Before Marian Diamond's research, the accepted scientific understanding of the brain was profoundly mistaken on a key point.
Joining us now, Dr. Marian Diamond. She has spent 30 years studying the brain.
この人はMarian Diamond.
Marian Diamond is the author of the first study ever published about the brain of Albert Einstein.
It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Marian Diamond.
So welcome to our great university at Berkeley. How many of you have studied brains? How many have studied human brains? How many have seen a human brain? For those who haven't seen a brain, well, when you see a lady with a hat box, you don't know what she's carrying, do you? And there you are. Did you know that this is what you hope you look like inside? The major parts, you see, the cerebrum. These deal with higher cognitive processing. For you to be thinking about what you want to do this evening, it may be coming out from your frontal lobe. Then you have a little brain, the cerebellum. How many of you have heard about a cerebellum?
Things are just flooding onto my brain right now to share. The marvelous things that this brain can do. This 3-pound mass that sits in there. Everybody wants a better brain. There's no doubt. If there's an opportunity to improve your brain, you want to be there. And so, 5 items that we have found are essential for a better brain. I think of all the millions of things, but 5 shown in our work. And the first was diet. The second was exercise. The third was challenge. And the fourth was newness. And the fifth, we've added love.
When somebody comes along with an entirely new idea that shatters the old one, this shatters a very important part of us, part of our internal world. And by nature of the beast, it's bitterly fought.
Scientific advance doesn't occur on a linear continuum. It occurs in fits and stops and jolts and cliffs and abrupt changes. And I think Marian's work was a classic example of that. I think most people would have said, why are you doing that dumb experiment? You're just wasting a lot of rats and a lot of rat food. But in fact, she was right, and the scientific culture at that point was wrong.
Lovely. Well, thanks for joining us for that screening. I hope you enjoyed it. We hope you very much you enjoyed it. And we are absolutely delighted to have Gary Weimberg here with us, who's one half of Lunar Productions, along with his partner, Catherine Ryan. So he's very kindly agreed to answer a few questions. And if any of you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat box and I can ask Gary directly. At Luna Productions, you make a lot of different documentary films. I noticed that you've done many topics, the American Mob, and a musical is in the pipeline, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so if you are interested in seeing all of that, it's all available online on lunaproductions.com. But this is the only science documentary you've done. Is that right? Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So we were wondering how you first came to hear about Marianne and all of the work she's done.
Henrietta, let me answer, but thank you everybody for attending, and Michelle, thank you for inviting me, and Stephanie and Henrietta, thank you so much for hosting. By the time this film was done, Marianne and her husband Arnie were truly my wife's and my best friends. So it's a delight to share her with you on so many different levels, you know, certainly starting with the scientific. And so I referred to Kathy Ryan, my co-producer. She's also my wife, so that's who I was talking about. And then, oh, I've already forgotten your question, Henrietta, but it was the genesis of this project. Is that what it was?
Yes. So how did you first meet Marianne, and how did it first come together and into fruition?
Well, with scientists here, I can use the term that we now know was our search method. We didn't know at first. We knew we were looking for a documentary topic, but truly, I can use the term evidence-based good news. In documentaries, there are so many tragedies and horrible things in the world that we need to pay attention to. And we just finished a film on conscientious objectors in the US military in the war of Iraq called Soldiers of Conscience, which was a very important film about war and peace and killing, and very intense to work on. And we said, enough of shining the light on death and the things to avoid. Let's do something else. And my wife very wisely said, and also let's do something that doesn't involve going to a war zone or traveling halfway around the world. So we live in Berkeley, California, and she said, let's go to the marvelous University of California, a public institution, and there find the next topic. And she did a marvelous month of research, and people gave us so many professors to talk to. And then one of them said, oh, I've given you 30 names, but I just thought of the most important one, the woman whose class made my daughter inspired to become a doctor. So we went to that class and we were thrilled with Marianne, just as I'm sure you all are. And everything happened from there. We asked her permission and she said, well, if it will help people's knowledge about the brain, yes. And off we went.
I think I'm going to take over. It looks like we lost Etta.
Well, I'm sorry for talking so long. I put our host to sleep. I'll try to answer shorter.
No, sorry about that.
Oh, there you are. I get back to you.
So I won't make you repeat your answer again because...
Henrietta, you'll have to watch it on the video.
Yeah, I'll have to rewatch it. Luckily, we've still got that. Yeah, so shall I move over to the second question? You can tell me if you answered. The question was, what was the story you wanted to tell and what were the main aspects? So you spent 5 years filming with Marianne. Did you have an idea by the end of the main themes that you wanted to bring out, and were there any that you would like to have brought out but you didn't have time to?
Well, 5 years is so long, I actually forget what we wanted to do at the beginning.
Sure.
This film truly was made by 4 people, my wife and myself, and truly Dr. Diamond and her husband, Arnie. As a non-scientist, I'm the son of a scientist, but as a non-scientist and as a filmmaker, I felt totally incompetent to talk about the brain. So one of our early preconditions was, would you help us at every step to make sure that this is worthy of carrying scientific knowledge to everyone? And it turned into a rich and marvelous collaboration. Henrietta, you missed it, but Arnie and Marianne became our best friends by the end of this film. The honor of sitting with them, they were in retirement, as you saw from the film, by the end, and they called us their last students. And then lovingly, we called them our current students because they became expert filmmakers by the end. For all our PhD listeners, I'm proud to say that Dr. Arnie Scheibel, who asserted that he knew nothing about filmmaking, by the end was critiquing the performance of our Emmy Award-winning narrator, and to good effect. He said, no, she doesn't have the warmth that you have to go back. And I'm like, okay, Arnie. And truly, he was right.
There must be some parallels, I suppose, between teaching and documentary filmmaking, in the sense that they spent a lifetime teaching, and so their experience in how to convey a message must have been useful in creating the film as well.
Yes, and Henrietta, this is a really interesting topic for me, because science is a narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Films are storytellings, documentaries as well, which are narratives. Teaching is bringing those narratives through stories in such a way that they engage and inspire students. So the overlap there is incredible. And I'm sure many of us in this room, teachers themselves, you know you're an entertainer when you're up there. I mean, whether you acknowledge it or not is we can rate teachers on that, but you have to inspire, engage, reach out. And of course, Marian Diamond was so superb at that. I mean, perhaps I can go back to your previous question. Our primary goal, in answering this one as well, our primary goal, a personal goal, was literally every time I would go to a lecture of Marian Diamond, someone would come up to us with the camera and do a testimony about what she had meant and her teaching had meant in their lives. Like individual lectures from her to strangers in the audience, they would turn to me and say, "This has changed my life. My knowledge about the brain is new this moment, and I will do something different from now on." I mean, that's amazing teaching. And in terms of our goals, we thought, can that be reproduced on film? Can we capture the truth of this great teacher and researcher to such an extent that someone watching an hour video will feel the same? And I'm very proud to say the first day that that occurred, which was 4.5 years into working on it. So by my own standards, for 4.5 years, I considered the film a failure and potentially the worst film I ever made when it was really a mess. And then through work and persistence, it more and more reflected who she was, what she did, the truth, the drama, the passion that she approached science. And then when that young woman came up to me and said, now I know what to study for the rest of my life, I knew, okay, we're getting there.
Mm-hmm. You said your father was a scientist, is that right? Was he a neuroscientist or?
No, a microbacteriologist. And I am so sorry that he wasn't alive to be on this journey with me. He would have enjoyed it so much. And I really got to feel his spirit in doing this. So, Dad.
How much time did you spend with Marian? Did you see her weekly, or was it sort of in short bursts over 5 years, or fairly consistent?
Well, because of my wife's wisdom of choosing a story that is convenient to where we live, we saw her all the time. And, for example, the marvelous scene where she's in her cooking, asserting that women scientists make good cooks, that came about because Arnie, her husband, called me on the phone and said, Gary, you invited me to tell you when you need to film. Well, you need to film right now. She's making her famous Thanksgiving pies, and those should be in the movie. I'm like, okay. And literally, Henrietta, 20 minutes later, I was at her house. And, we spent a month. So all sorts of availabilities. And then after the film was over, the friendship continued as they were in retirement. And even, I will say something for the benefit of you in the room here now. This is something I would never have said when Dr. Diamond was alive, out of respect for her privacy. But like everyone, we die for reasons. So one of the things that was going on with her in her extreme age was cognitive decline. And as she was having memory challenges, she took to watching this film over and over again. Mm. And I forget why I began this story, but I'll just conclude it by saying it's one of the great honors in my life to help someone who I consider to be a very dear friend by returning her own life back to her at a time where it wasn't so present. Mm-hmm. And she was a very modest person personally. She had no sense of history appreciating her. And that would be a dialogue we would have frequently, like, are you sure this is worth it? My breakthroughs were all in the 60s. And I'm like, Marian, I'll make the film. You just talk to me. Don't worry about the marketing or who's interested. And so by the time she passed away, not only did she get from the film, but as I read her obituaries, I feel sure that her place as one of the founders of modern neuroscience, that argument was presented by the film. her life's work was what was persuasive. But I'm proud to be, among my greatest achievements, put it on my gravestone, biographer of Dr. Marian Diamond.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, her contributions may have started off in the 60s and 70s, but they clearly spread in so many directions and have inspired so many people. So it's sort of something that grows anyway, and she very much deserves her accolades. Yeah, do you have any other anecdotes about Marian you could share with us? Any that particularly stood out to you?
Well, you have to be careful when you ask me that, because I could go on all day, but I'll mention one other one that's more lighthearted than the beautiful support of her in her old age. But early on in the film, well, one of her principles of brain health is newness. So I called her up and I said, Marian, there's this list in the newspaper of the best homes in Berkeley with Christmas lights. And I've bought a new camera to film. And what I'd like to do is to go and film you walking amongst the twinkling of the lights. And I explained to her I was going to use a slow shutter speed and it would look like synapses of the brain firing as she drifted through, So I said that. And she says, well, I've never done anything like that before. So yes. So the very delight that she had in science, came to our collaboration together. And it really felt that at every time. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'll go on with one more quick detail. That moment that I described filming with her with the pies was sort of the opposite of what we often think about storytelling and drama and media, which is to say, she's at home doing the most, family, familiar, and intimate of experiences of pies for people she loves. And I'm there with her for the whole time. And it's just a quiet moment of her and me and the camera. And it brought her to reflect on her life and her achievements and her families and her memories. It was so precious to share that. And the first edit of that scene, which had long memories of her parents and her childhood growing up, was 12 minutes long, just that scene. And I was so moved by the personal intimacy and what we had shared, and there it was on film. She looked at it and she said, that should be about 10 seconds in the finished film. And of course, by the way, she was right. I mean, as to your earlier question, what was our difference from beginning to end? I thought it would be far more personal. And truly, we have all that material, but she was very clear. And so were all our audiences, because we tested it quite extensively before we were done. Mm. They said, she's a great woman, but don't diminish her science by talking so much about her being personal. And now we start to talk about gender. I think the personal part of all of us as people, and certainly as scientists, is very important to represent. But as a woman, she was like, treat me as I deserve as a working professional. This personal stuff, take it out. And audiences felt the same. So it's a very different film than I had thought. I thought maybe. And then once she started to get older, I thought, oh, it'll have this personal dimension of her decline. And then it became very clear, no, this is a film about her scientific legacy. Because I am so personally engaged with her, I doubt I will do it, but in my mind, there's a fantasy of a film called My Friend Marian, which is a very intimate film about a great scientist and the privilege I had of being her friend. For those of you who have ever read the book Tuesdays with Morrie, it would have that emotional connection of a younger, starry-eyed person, very impressed with the wisdom of someone who's lived a life richly. So I don't know if any of you run a foundation, call me later, we'll work it out, we'll make that film.
The point you make about gender is very interesting and important, I think, because she was a very feminine person, and her femininity is very important, and a lot of the traditional associations with women, she brings them out, but at the same time, she's very strong. And I think there's a lot of emphasis within science to be strong and to reduce your femininity in order to be taken seriously. But she was very much taken seriously while having that. Was it something that she commented on as well when you were filming with her, and something that was ever developed?
Yes. I won't answer the wardrobe question in depth, but I will say that there's a marvelous montage of her teaching, and its intent in the film is to demonstrate the breadth of her teaching and how she does it. But for those who want to know, it's also a cross-section of outfits and scarves that Marian wears.
Wonderful scarf.
More seriously about gender discrimination, she was very clear that she was a scientist. And, I say it that way because, of course, she's a woman scientist. And of course, she was that and proud of it. But she didn't want to be pigeonholed or reduced by being half of the human species as a woman, for all the fact that she embraced that. So, for example, she was very reticent to talk about gender discrimination that she truly experienced on camera. Personally, we talked about it a lot. But you'll notice in the film, as there's a couple of very specific examples in the film, being shouted at in a way that, well, other people are shouted at conventions, but certainly taking her name off a study because she's a woman, as clear as could be. The numbers, the few women in her medical school class. She didn't put it on film, but she had to do a huge tenure battle, even though her credentials were impeccable. So there's a lot of bitterness there that led to the quote in the film, "Never learn bitterness because you are the one who suffers." But a small detail on that, if you notice, that's told by the narrator. Marian talked to us about this a lot, but she didn't want to go on camera being that person. Her support of women and women in science was personal, passionate, and lifelong, but it wasn't public. For her, I am far more strident as a feminist man than she was. She wasn't strident. She was a scientist, and her advocacy should come through her work. And I so respect that integrity. And, truly, that particular sequence, I was like, Marian, is this okay? Am I putting words in your mouth? She says, no. If you have to, you can do that. So I admire that position. And I will say, I have noticed that in some other great women. There's a woman, anyhow, that distinction about women who are engaged in violating, in destroying the glass ceilings in whatever way, they carry their own scars. And in this particular case, it was a shyness about strident public speech that I think it helped her personally. And I admire that position, even though I don't share it. I'm much more of a say it and fight it out.
Yeah. Well, the gender issue is definitely something very present in all of science. So we always like to sort of develop that as an aspect. And I think she's done a lot for inspiring women to go into neuroscience in the first place and generally into STEM, which is great. Okay, so I'll move more lighthearted or more practical into what it was like. What were the challenges you encountered? Did you encounter any challenges when you were filming, or was it fairly straightforward?
Well, when I mentioned that it was going to be the worst film of our lives in the first 4.5 years, the challenges were significant. So I mentioned our previous film was about killing and war in Iraq and conscious objectors, highly controversial. So we said, okay, please, let's do one that's not controversial. And Marian is as sweet as could be. So we thought, oh, this will not be controversial at all. Well, what happened? We live in the United States. The Republicans launched a war against women, and we were making a film about women. The whole society is prejudiced against elderly, and we were making a film about an elderly person. And now we all know the Republicans in the United States launched a war against science. So at the very moment we were making a non-controversial film about an elderly woman scientist, we found we were in the middle of controversy all over again. And it made it virtually unfundable, to my amazement. So that was part of the difficulties. And in terms of gender discrimination, I will not bore you to talk about the sexism that this film faced from broadcasters of all stripes, commercial and public broadcasters, who just weren't interested in a woman scientist. And even those who would acknowledge how underrepresented they were in the media, it's like, oh, she's not that important. Even after the film was nominated for an Emmy Award, secondary opportunities for the film, people, and we've all seen the film. So if I assert that it's well made, you can decide for yourself, but I will simply assert that. There's no reason for people to not be interested in this film based on the content or how it's made. So the sexism has been so vivid. I'll pause there, just asserting, I can give you many details, but challenging in a way that I had never expected. I'll mention something more scientific though. The interesting challenge of providing visualizations of the brain. I mean, amongst this esteemed audience, I'm sure you're familiar with how many marvelous advances there's been in brain imagery and brain technology. Well, we made the film over 5 years. I was constantly having to replace old images of the brain as new, ever more fantastic technologies emerged. And just after we finished, oh, please forgive me that I'm going to forget some of the details, but I think it's called the clarity process.
Yeah.
It comes out of a professor in Stanford. You're nodding. Okay, so I hope I'm getting it right. But if I understand, it just gets rid of fatty or cellulose tissues and leaves underlying. Okay, very good, Henriette. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the imagery of the brain it reveals is fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'm like, darn it, I'm 3 months too late, put that in. So that was an interesting challenge, keeping up with current science while I'm doing something. I mean, even for all of the plasticity is now established, the implications of it, it's just changing constantly.
I thought you did a good job of that though, because there's a moment when you go through and you show the rat cortex and you very quickly show the concept, and it's only a space of a few seconds, but based on the visuals, you can immediately get the sense of it. So I'm sure everyone would agree that it was very enjoyable. I was wondering, was there anything you learned about the brain when you were doing the documentary that was your sort of most amazing thing that you learned?
So many things that I had to write this down for myself. The most amazing thing, the single most amazing thing, is what's in the film. And this is actually a sentence that came from Arnie Scheibel in conversation, but it works perfectly to be applied to Marian Diamond's plasticity research. But the sentence that with plasticity, we understand that the mature brain is your own personal masterpiece. That is so fantastic. And it's such a wonderful way to conceptualize who we are. And then behind that comes all the science of the details. So there's a million things I could say to you. Marian's lecture that begins with, think about the brain. You drink coffee that's hot and ice cream that's cold, and it regulates your body temperature to 1/10 of the degree, no matter what you put in the system. And I'm like, yeah, how does it do that? And then, she gives us all the details. So it was one delicious thing after another. And as I explained to you, when we become best friends, we would go to their, senior living situation, and we'd have these lunches, and we'd go over everything that came in the news and each different things and endless questions. So one lunch in particular, we were talking about competition within the brain. And of course, with this audience, everybody knows more than I do, but we get all the sensory input. We have all these trillions of connections. What does the brain focus on? So a huge amount of the brain's energy is about, shut up, everybody. I'm working on breathing right now, or whatever the brain is focusing on. So, I have this loving personal masterpiece concept of the brain, but it's also dog eat dog in there. There's a lot of stop remembering the faces of strangers. The amount of physical space in the brain that's devoted to forgetting is quite impressive. You wouldn't realize it. And of course, I can't tell you exactly well, I'm sure here in the audience, someone will contribute exactly the areas of the brain that help us lose parts of our memories and not be barraged by everything we've experienced. I could go on, but I won't.
No, not at all. We're enjoying it. How long did it take to make the documentary? So in comparison to the amount you filmed for? So
it took that 5 years.
Editing. So 5 years all in all, and you were editing throughout at the same time while you're doing it.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, well, we probably are reaching the end of our Q&A time. So I'm going to finish by asking you what you've got planned in the future. Have you got any documentaries planned that we should be looking out for, or things coming out anytime soon?
Yes, but before I answer that, I do want to mention to everybody who's listening, of course, we are professional documentary filmmakers, so we do sell the DVD, but I'll also mention that it's available for free on a pay as much as you want or have it for free basis. So I'm going to invite everyone here to go to lunaproductions.com, our website, during the pandemic, when distance learning is so important, you know, do I have the spirit of Marian Diamond whispering in my ears? Yes. So I feel very motivated to make this available for free. So that includes everybody here. So just to say that, and if you use it in your classes, I'd be delighted and honored. So lunaproductions.com has all the information there. And I tried to put this in the chat. I'm going to try one more time. We've just now created a study guide. So no one has used it as yet. We're going to be testing it and revising it. Let's see. I keep pressing it in. If people can look at it.
I think I saw it up there earlier. I'll try and add it as well. And it's for college level and for school level, is that right? So you've got
yes, we have 2 levels. So collectively, they go from 5th grade through Nobel Prize winner, is what we like to say. So well prepared there. But I would be so honored if any of you want to use this in your teaching and would even just glance at the study guide and tell me what you think. So there's a lot of resources there. I don't know that I've success. So if you can't find it, lunaproductions.com is the website. And I'll try to make it obvious where it is, but it's.
You can also link up and we put it on the website afterwards. So it's on both websites and cross-linked. So easy to.
Go.
Okay,
That's the study guide. I've just sent it to everyone in the chat.
Oh, very good. Thank you. So next projects. Well, oddly, during the pandemic, we've been doing a lot of pro bono videos to help distance learning. All of our lives have changed so much. So it turns out that the skill set that we have as storytellers becomes really important right now. So we helped, I'm proud to say, we did the video portion of raising $400,000 for the Berkeley Public Schools Fund to distribute computers to children who had none, and with distance learning were truly isolated and destined to ignorance if nobody dealt with it. So there's that. And then we're also working on a documentary that's related to the Black Lives Matter issue here in the United States, a horrible tragedy of racism that fortunately a lot of people are paying attention to. And Henrietta, since you referred to it, then I have another fun project. I'm not that the others are, well, they're fun in their own ways, but an older documentary of ours about the mother-daughter relationship. We are converting into a musical for the stage to be Mothers and Daughters, the musical. And we are currently collaborating with Linda Ronstadt, the great American singer, and Joyce Carol Oates, the great American author. And I'm imagining a community of women that will be part of the authorship of this, and inspired by the true stories of 400 women and girls that we interviewed for the documentary and are in that film. We're going to take it to Broadway if Broadway ever opens up again, and we'll have singing and dancing documentary truths.
Wonderful.
On the mother-daughter relationship.
Great. And I noticed there's also a documentary about sons and fathers, is that right, as well? So you have both.
Yes. After we did Mothers and Daughters, we did Fathers and Sons.
Yeah, that's good. Not leaving.
And for my scientists, I'll just add one sentence. So we chose to do 400 pre-interviews and interviews with women for Mothers and Daughters to get the true truth. And among scientists, you know how important a large sample size is. If you want to tell a huge theme, like the mother-daughter relationship, which I would argue includes every human in the planet since we all have mothers, but certainly at least half. So to represent that theme, we chose the number 400 and we did far more. And that resulted in a rich biographical database from which to make a great film, in my opinion. Sorry, a very strong film. To get the same level of insight took 600 interviews with men for Fathers and Sons. So there's my quantitative difference in the storytelling self-knowledge of men versus women based on real-world study.
Very nice. Well, I'd advise everyone to have a watch of those 2 documentaries and to make your own judgment based on them. Okay, well, so I will say thank you to everybody for joining us, to Steph for organizing. Here she is saying something.
There's one question in the audience.
Yes, Rita has raised
it. Rita has a question. So if you just unmute yourself, you can ask directly. There we go.
Hey guys, good morning. I'm it's morning here in my place. So thank you very much for this amazing morning film evening event. I really enjoyed it. I'm a newly admitted student at Harvard Graduate School of Education. I study mind, brain, and education. It's a kind of like cross-disciplinary area. Well, I kind of have a question about brain and how unique it is. Yeah, absolutely. It's for every individual, it's a special. And I studied something about fingerprint. It's like evidence in criminal a criminal event. It seems like a fingerprint is also kind of unique for each of us. So I don't know. It's kind of brain is one thing, and fingerprint seems to be another thing. But could they be related as well?
If you're asking me to answer, yes.
Cool. I just come up with this. It seems like yeah, brain is fascinating. And another question for Gary, when you mentioned about other documentary films about father, children, mothers, and children, I'm so interested in these topics. I believe they are so meaningful for education. And when would that be public? I mean, for the public to watch. When would they be released? Yes.
Well, they have all been broadcast on television in the past, and various of them are available in various things. But for those of us right here, the easiest is through our website. There's pieces of them available, and then currently everything's available for free for those who don't feel like spending money on it. You know, you just have to email in the form and I send you back what it is. So yes, Rita, glad to satisfy your curiosity, and everyone here. One of the great joys of making this offer during the pandemic time is that I do enjoy sharing our life's work, and it's a great honor to, well, you've just been through the Marian Diamond experience, to be invited into the lives of so many people and share their truths. You know, I feel very honored. So at those moments where I can set aside business concerns and just share them for free, it's a joy. So please do, everybody, you know, go to the website and feel welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
I'll just mention one more thing is the website has a contact form, but it just goes to me. So if you're trying to continue the discussion, we're a small company. So, you know, easy to get a hold of me right there.
Does anyone else have any questions? Sorry, I should have asked around. Nope. Well, as Gary said, you can contact him directly through the website. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. Thanks, Steph, for helping organize, and Ahmad and Michelle as well. And particularly Gary for sharing your wonderful experiences with Marianne, not just permanently, but also, you know, in this conversation. It's been really, really amazing to hear the actual experience of how it was, and with such an amazing woman. And so, yeah, I call you all to come to our next clinical neuroanatomy seminar. To quote Marianne, use it or lose it. If you want to keep learning, we'll have our next seminar on next month. And we'll have a UCL professor speaking to us about brain networks. His final topic hasn't been decided yet, but it will be on the 24th of September. And if you can keep an eye on our website and Twitter to keep on top of that. Okay, thanks everybody. And if we could ask Gary if you'd hold back, the others, you're welcome to leave the room. But we'd like to just have a quick chat with Gary before the end. Thanks. Bye.